At iungo, we work with organisations to help them embed immersive learning, flexible working and remote working and digital practices into their strategy and into their employee value proposition to help them really prepare a future fit workplace. And I think the critical thing there is around employee value proposition and how you utilise some of these technologies in your onboarding processes, in your learning and development processes, and how you use them to really optimise the value that your employees can create for your organisation. Since the pandemic, companies have really got to grip with how onboarding needs to change. It needs to become much more personalised to the individual. I think we've got a much better awareness of mental health, of well-being, of the need and the importance of work-life balance, but also harnessing people's individual skills. They're not just a number in the workplace, they're there to create value. And so onboarding now should be at least a much more personal process for an employee to go through. If we think about an employee value proposition, there are sort of 3 levels to it. So you've got your transactional layer of an employee value proposition, which is all about sort of salary and holidays and those contractual benefits that you get. The middle tier is really about well-being and the employee experience, and that really comes through now in the onboarding process, so the different types of benefits that you might offer an individual. But the top layer, possibly the most important layer, is about purpose. It's about the emotional connection between the employee and the organisation. And I think most organisations that have really come out of the pandemic doing well and growing their workforce rather than struggling to recruit and retain staff have really managed to tap into that purpose and find something that links those employees to that overall mission. So in some ways, the skills that managers and leaders need in a digital environment are actually not that different to the skills that we needed in a traditional environment. The difference is there is a greater need, and the gap, if you like, is exacerbated if we don't have those skills. So the core skills would be communication and how you embed communication channels throughout your organisation, how you make sure the right information is getting to the right people at the right time, but also how that network of communication happens within the organisation rather than in those vertical channels. I think that is a big change in a digital workplace. We've got a really good opportunity to have that network of relationships and connections. Managing expectations, it's always been important. We used to refer to it as the psychological contract. When am I expected to turn up for work? When would I be expected to leave the workplace? Can I go off site for my lunch break? It's turning that now into what are the expectations in a digital workplace? Is it okay to start work at 10 o'clock? Well, maybe it is. Maybe it depends on your job. Is it okay to work at 2 o'clock in the morning? Some of my guys certainly do. So it's really sort of understanding and bringing it back to bare bones on what are the key success factors for your organisation and how do you translate that into some guidelines and some expectations that employees can follow.
Employee experience, quite simply, is the experience that you as an employee get at any point within the employee life cycle. So the employee life cycle for me and my team, when we're talking about it, is the first interaction that you have with Sonovate. And that might be a job description or any piece of information that you might read on Sonovate on a website, to the first conversation you have with us when you're coming to discuss a potential opportunity. It will go right the way throughout the recruitment process, through to your offer process, onboarding, how we train, develop, engage you into the role, how we support you in learning new skills, how we discuss your individual values, your drivers, your motivations, how we carry out what we call a best self review, which in old language would be an appraisal. How do we enable you to become your best selves within Sonovate? And by your best selves, it means your individual best selves, you. Every single person within the business is different. Every single person is driven by different things, motivated by different things. And we want to understand each and every person's individual motivations, drivers, desires, skills, to be able to enable them to come on the journey, their individual journey with the Sonovate, but as part of a wider, more understanding team that will enable them to join their career and grow. And it goes right the way through then to the stage where they may decide to leave us or we part ways. So it's making sure that we really think about every step of that process and how we enable and support our people to come and be exceptional within the roles that they fulfill. In terms of employee experience and the impact that has on culture, they sit absolutely hand in hand. If you're driven to provide your employees the best experience that they can have along the whole employee life cycle with you, then culture is going to be pretty important to you. It's going to be at the top of your priorities. And a culture is really something that's created by tying together all of the experiences of all the individuals and what they bring to the business. Now, when we talk about an employee experience, an exceptional employee experience where you can be and become your best selves and the individualization within that, we're talking about celebrating the differences that people bring. We're talking about how do we use people's superpowers, whatever that may be. It could be a neurodiverse individual who is exceptional at a certain part of a job, and they could come on board and bring that. And as part of the team, you have people that work together collaboratively to deliver something completely different and exceptional. It could be that you have somebody from a different background or somebody from a different ethnicity. It could be anything. It's really about embracing all the differences that we have within people, within Sonovate and external to Sonovate, to ensure that as a team, we work really well collaboratively. We're a well-rounded team that can drive successful outcomes strategically, commercially, and collectively. So organizations need to consider their whole, it comes down to the employee life cycle. It comes down to every single point that an employee will travel on throughout their journey within a business. So you need to think about how you want to operate as a business. What are your values? What are your behaviors? What's really important for you? What's the strategic vision of the business? What's the vision? What's the short-term plan versus what's the long-term plan? And if you understand they're your foundations, they're your kind of your base line, and moving on from that is then how do you talk to people, how do you support people, how do you bring people on the journey right the way from your recruitment process to onboarding, to developing, to providing feedback and growing, to training, to compensation and rewards, to at some point potentially leaving the business. It's making sure that you go through every single step of it and ensuring that you are really clear as to what's important to you and how you operate the processes throughout all of those steps. Meaningful connections are only meaningful if they are truly authentic. And I think the most important thing to note that historically you would have had if you think of push and pull style of communication, you would have historically had a very push style of communication potentially within organizations where the senior leadership team or the executive team would have pushed information down to their employees and not necessarily had the opportunity to have two-way conversations for them to ask questions to really gain an understanding. And even if they did, they may not have fully listened to what was truly being said.
To create great employee experiences, I think there are a few things that organizations need to understand and they can focus on, right? Number one is to understand what I call the employee experience equation, which is culture times technology times physical space equals employee experience. Meaning that every leader, every organization needs to understand that there are three environments that they can control and shape and design for: culture, technology, and space. There are 10 things for culture, there are 3 things for technology, and there are 4 things for space. But broadly speaking, those are the 3 environments, and organizations, leaders just need to understand that, hey, these are the 3 things that we can design and create for. That's number one. Number 2 is I think leaders need to understand the moments that matter in the lives of their employees. We traditionally have this concept of the employee life cycle, which a lot of people know. It's, the circular image, and it's attract, hire, nurture, retain, transition, blah, 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 blah. The problem with that is that that's not how employees view their time with you. If you were to go to any one of your employees and say, hey, what stage are you in? They're going to look at you like you're nuts. Like, what do you mean, what stage am I in? Who are you? But instead, if you go to one of your employees and say, hey, how's it going at the company? They're going to respond to you in terms of moments. Oh, I'm working on this really big project. I just got promoted. I'm having a really hard time with this client. It's moments. And so leaders need to understand the moments that matter in the lives of their employees. These could be personal moments or these could be work-related moments. buying my first house. I'm going through a divorce. We had our first child, right? What are these moments, whether personal or professional, that matter in the lives of your employees, and how do you design experiences around them? A classic one that a lot of organizations get wrong is an employee's first day on the job, right? How many times do you hear stories an employee's first day on the job and it's like, nobody greets them, they get to their desk, they have like a laptop that's folded down with a Post-it note on it that says welcome, they try to log into things, they can't access anything, they got to go to IT, they eat lunch by themselves. It's a terrible experience on day one, and then they get home and their spouse or a significant other says, hey honey, how was your day? You say, man, it sucked. Nobody even knew I was there. I felt like a cog. I had lunch by myself. Like, it was terrible. And immediately from day one, you're kind of like, I don't know if this is the right choice for me. So moments that matter in the lives of your employees, crucial. Another thing that organizations can do, you put people in positions of power who care. I can talk to you about employee experience all day long, but if you have leaders in your company who are like, command and control, I'm going to tell you what to do, you shut up and do your job, it doesn't matter how much I tell you, it doesn't matter what books I recommend, that's how it's going to be. And I've actually talked to a lot of CEOs, a lot of leaders in organizations who are making changes to their leadership team. And they're being very upfront and saying, look, if you're not on board with this new direction, then either these leaders are going to end up leaving the company, they're going to transition, we're going to try to coach them and mentor them. If they're not able to get on board, they can't be a part of this company. And we're going to see more and more of that going forward. So put people in positions of power who care about employee experience and putting people first. And the last thing that I can recommend is to treat your organization much more like a laboratory and less like a factory. Factories are linear, they're process-centric, they're all about the status quo. It's, the pyramid hierarchy, right? That's how the factories operate. Laboratories, on the other hand, they test, they experiment, they innovate, they embrace failure. There's coaching, there's data. That's how we need to think about this stuff. You're not going to get everything right the first time when it comes to employee experience. You're going to make mistakes. People might get angry. People might get frustrated. That's okay. It's part of the process of learning what your employees care about and what they value. Because really what we're doing, we're creating experiences with our employees, not for them. But I think those are 4 places where organizations can start to create better experiences for their employees. No, when I think about the evolution of employee experience image, I think everything is still just as relevant now. In fact, I think we are now just barely getting started with that employee experience environment. We've talked about it for years, but organizations kind of were like, yeah, that's nice to have, we'll get to it one day. Then the pandemic happened, and now it's kind of like front and center. So now, more and more, we're seeing companies really focus on that. Nothing has changed, except I think the emphasis and the focus on employee experience now has never been greater.